welcome to episode 171 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Lydia Creech,
Diana Rogers.
In today's episode, we will be talking about movies we saw this week in part 1, and in part 2, we will be continuing our series on the Archers with 1947's Black Narcissus. Little side note, I will most likely at least once call it Black Narcissist. I apologize.
I feel like it's not an episode of Cinematary unless one of us is fucking something up.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. I've said it up so many times already before. I'm just gonna. It's gonna slip in at one point. So I apologize ahead of time. Yeah, I just wanted to get
apologies. Are a good look in 2017.
That's true.
It's a lot of S's. I mean, it's not a Narcissus. It's it's a lot.
But, all right.
It's okay.
Well, yeah, let's go ahead and do movies that we saw this week. Diana, I'm gonna start with you. You caught a new release and one I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about, and that is Lady Bird, the directorial debut of Greta Gerwig.
Greta Gerwig, who's amazing, and the movie is absolutely fantastic. I went into it with very high expectations, and I think it probably exceeded them. It's absolutely hilarious. It's kind of emotionally exhausting in a really good way. It's got great performances. I mean, Saoirse Ronan is fantastic. Laurie Metcalf. It's just wonderful. I liked it a lot.
Did you relate to it as a period piece? Because what I've heard is that it's like the period piece, like 2002, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, like I graduated college by that point. I mean,
Okay.
I saw it with a few friends who were my age. I saw it with my mom, and then I saw it with a few friends who were a little bit younger, and so it was a nice kind of mixed group of age ranges that I saw it with, and so I didn't entirely relate, I guess, to some of the, but I kind of did the pop cultural stuff. Like I sort of did. There's like that. I don't know if y'all know about the thing about like the Dave Matthews Band song that's in it, and like I remember, like I was in college when I had a very brief affection for Dave Matthews Band, and I kind of remembered that, like, so I sort of related. Yeah, I did kind of relate to it on a period level, but also just as a general kind of coming of age story, it resonated in a really good way.
Yeah. For those who may be unfamiliar, the movie follows this character named Lady Bird, and kind of, what is it? Kind of over the course of a year in Northern California, kind of.
Yeah. Her last year in Catholic school, and she is wanting to go to an East Coast college, and she wants culture, and she wants to kind of reinvent herself, and she's kind of a tough nut, and her mom sort of is too. Like they're very, like the dad even says to her at one point, like, you and your mom are both very strong personalities, which they are. That was just wonderful, and kind of like,
You said you went and saw it with your mom. I know that a lot of people have talked about immediately wanting to call their moms after they saw this because of the performances between Saoirse Ronan and Laurie Metcalf and their kind of relationship in the movie. What was it like, going to see this with your mother and then walking out of it,
I really wanted. My mom is pretty awesome in that she will watch anything with me and talk to me about anything and be totally accepting of any weird kind of thing that, like, she's been such a good mom. And but then this friend I saw it with, one of my friends, she's 23, so she's kind of like my little surrogate daughter. So I almost felt like I had like a daughter, mother, grandmother kind of situation going on, which was nice. If that even makes sense, but like it did, like, because
It's generational-ish.
friend was like, "You've got to bring your mom because we need a mom presence when we watch it." And my mom loved it, and it was great. I mean, we just enjoyed the hell out of it. It's just yeah. But I didn't have a contentious kind of. I was not really like a pushback kind of kid when I was younger. I always got along really well with my mom, so that aspect of it was interesting too, because that wasn't my experience, but I could relate to how kind of frustrated they got with each other and how they sort of butted up against each other a lot. But yeah, it was terrific.
Yeah. Well, I guess for those interested, Lady Bird, it seems like it's in most theaters now. So if you have a chance, it seems like I would say that you recommend checking it out and going with your mom.
Absolutely. Yes. Take your mom by all means if you can, or take your surrogate mom or your surrogate daughter, or, or just
get a whole generation of thing going.
Like, just go see it. And it's so funny. Like, I actually like snort laughed during it. And then I got really embarrassed because I was like snorting in the theater. It's so fantastic. That's a high compliment when I say like I snort laugh during something in public. Yeah.
There you go. That should be on the poster.
I snort laugh.
I snort laugh.
Go see this movie. It'll make you snort laugh. Yeah.
All right, Lydia, you had 2 movies you wanted to talk about. Which one would you like to start with? Would you like to be positive or negative first?
I'll make a little negativity sandwich and do the negative one first. And then we'll end
negativity's. Oh, I get it, because negativity's in the middle. Gotcha.
Yeah, you don't call it a bread sandwich. Anyway.
Yeah, go ahead. I gotcha.
I'm trying to catch up on films that came out in the first half of 2017 that I missed because I'm very bad at going to the theater. So this week I finally caught up to A Ghost Story, directed by David Lowery. I don't know. Did y'all talk about it on the podcast when it came out?
Yeah, Jessica and I talked about it.
Okay. I know Andrew has put it on his tentative top 10 for the end of the year, and I was like, and he was telling me how the filmmaking is really incredible and the narrative. So I was like, okay, maybe it'll be worth it. But I'm going to be honest, on first brush trailers, it just looked boring. And I want to try to get better at approaching films from like a formal perspective or some sort of theoretical approach, but I don't have that, and all I have are my feelings. And my feelings are I do not feel sorry for sad boy dead Casey Affleck, who seemed like he was a bad boyfriend, and you're better off without him, Rooney Mara.
She's sure allowed pie in her life since he's departed.
I think that's a fair trade. I mean, okay, a little bit of fairness. I will say that the story of A Ghost Story, Casey Affleck is in a relationship with Rooney Mara, but at the beginning of the film, not as...
I think they're married.
Oh, okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I think they are. Yeah.
But at the very beginning of the film, he gets in a car accident and he dies, but he wakes up and he's a Charlie Brown ghost with...
Yeah.
the sheets or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's drawn back to his house, and I guess he can't leave. Or the property of where he used to live. And I will say that once we got past like the first 45 minutes, which is Ghost watching his wife kind of go through the grieving process and then get over it and then leaving and being unable to follow her, actually it kind of like breaks free from like this linear sort of storytelling, and some of the images are really incredible and beautiful, and I will give it that. I actually got over the Charlie Brownness of the ghost and like it actually is pretty expressive and sad if you're inclined to feel sad. for him.
So I mean, was the sad boy Charlie Brown ghost like the main thing that you kind of did not connect with? I mean, what about, you mentioned that it kind of ditches this linear story and then kind of deals with these smaller stories, these kind of vignettes that it goes, bounces around to through time. Was it just kind of the movie overall, or what maybe what were you just not connecting with?
I think it was the kind of framing narrative, because like I said, after the first 45 minutes, it did pick up, and I was much more interested in this idea of being trapped, I guess, spatially, but not temporally. But the fact that it was just centered on this character that I didn't give two shits about, and not just because it's played by Casey Affleck, but I don't care. I will say Rooney Mara has the best "my boyfriend is making me listen to his dumb music" face that I related to a lot. So I mean, maybe the point was to get to this more interesting philosophical idea and like exploration of time, but it's the same reason I don't watch TV. Like, I don't have 45 minutes to wait for the story to be interesting. And I guess if I'm not on board with this grief, like that might be very compelling to some people. Like, I know the pie eating scene, it got touted a lot. And it's this like long drawn out sequence of grief, and it's like you have to sit with it, and she's sitting with it and like watching her process it. And maybe I'm broken on the inside for not.
Maybe you need some pie, Lydia.
Maybe.
I'm curious. What has been your experience with like slow cinema? Like, have you seen a lot of those types of movies? Has there been anything that you've liked before? That kind of genre?
Yeah, I know that Andrew has a particular affinity for slow cinema, so there might be that. I haven't seen like any. Oh God, a cheetah Pont.
You're on your own on that one. I'm sorry.
You knew what I meant though.
I know what you mean though.
I have seen Meek's Cutoff, and I really enjoyed that. And it might just be that because of whose perspective it was. And like Jean Dillman, I'll sit with that for a long time. And so like I'll watch Pioneer Women, I'll watch Housewives. I just don't think I don't care about just this mediocre musician, I guess.
Yeah, and then that's fair. And then you mentioned that Andrew was very high on some of the formal things. Did anything strike? Did you notice anything in between the Charlie Brown sad ghost?
I mean, the way that it loops back on itself. Oh, this is spoilers, I guess. I mean, it loops back on itself once we're at it. Like, it goes far into the future and then far into the past, and then eventually events that happen at the beginning of the film while Casey Affleck was still alive. He witnesses again from, I guess, across this like life-death barrier. And I don't know, maybe that was supposed to be some profound moment of like remembering something, and or something was resolved for him, but I don't know. I guess maybe I kind of lean on Jordan's side. Like, maybe I don't like these like closed loop time things, because that fucked me up with Arrival too. So that's also like a point of tension for me as a viewer.
All right. Well, a ghost story, I guess. If people are curious, I think it's on DVD and Blu-ray and stuff now. You can rent it on iTunes and Amazon, etc. Yeah, if you want to watch some people eat pie, it's a winner. We'll tell.
Charlie Brown Ghost.
Yeah,
I like Charlie Brown Ghost.
That's true.
I like the nostalgia kind of just of the trailer. I was like, that's so cute. Just a little.
He's not a scary ghost, although
like,
he is scary for a little bit to one family.
Oh God.
That's true. All right, well, tell us a little bit about the movie that you enjoyed much more.
This one did have scares in it, and this is way different. I watched The Bride of Frankenstein, 1935, James Whale, Boris Karloff. It's available on Shudder. Thanks, Nathan, for letting me use your Shudder.
Shout out.
We did Frankenstein, I think, last year for one of our horror series months.
Yes, that or the
We
year
definitely
before,
talked about it on the podcast. And I know I always wanted to catch up on like Universal Monsters universe. I'm sad that I didn't watch enough horror movies in October, so I just kind of extended it into November.
Totally approve of that.
Bride of Frankenstein is so good. I know we talked about how Frankenstein's monster in Frankenstein is actually like he's already a tragic figure, like, and like that comes across really well. But Bride of Frankenstein kind of just enhances that. It picks up right where Frankenstein ends. Somehow the monster has cheated death. And so he runs away, like, hurt and injured and scared from, like, the mob scene, which was sad and scary in Frankenstein. And he meets just, like, this blind man in the woods who can't see him, so he isn't scared of him. And so he, like, shows him kindness and compassion and teaches him how to talk. Meanwhile, there's this new mad scientist, Dr. Pretorius, who, like, wants to recreate this bringing a dead back from the life, thus, but like a female, thus the bride. And I totally upfront, I watched this because of the You Must Remember This podcast has done a Bella and Boris, series on Frankenstein and Dracula. And it's just really worth revisiting. I'm glad that I saw it. It's like heartbreaking. Watching.
Well, the end of that movie is just heart wrenching.
Because he like learns this concept of friendship, and he really wants a friend, and so they go to all this trouble, sort of, to make another monster, and she's scared of him too. And I was like, oh no. Although you totally see it coming. Like, you see it coming because I guess what these old monster horror movies are really good at setting up dramatic irony. I'm not saying that's a skill that's lost in modern horror films, but it's kind of a skill that's lost. So, like, you can see the mechanisms for this disastrous, not good reunion happening, just like from the get-go. I will also say that I think this probably influenced Twin Peaks: The Return a lot. I like just like electricity and some of the things that Frankenstein does. This Korea Longworth made this observation, and I'm just going to repeat it and say that I saw it too. So real good. I think people should watch it just to be a little bit, just cine literate, and also it's real good and only 75 minutes.
And I would also recommend listening to the You Must Remember This podcast on Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi. It's very interesting. Well, I believe that's all we have for part one. We're going to take a short break. We will be back talking 1947's Black Narcissus after this.
Hi there, Cinematary listeners. This is your favorite Filipino podcaster, Jessica Carr, with an important message during this break in the show. Cinematary would like you to know that we surprisingly do not want your money, and we don't want to place ads in the show at this time. That's not why we do this. We do it because we enjoy each other's company, and we want to bring you our pure, unadulterated opinions on the world of cinema. However, there are a few things you can do to help out the show that we would greatly appreciate. Firstly, leave us a review on iTunes, preferably a positive one, because apparently this will help increase our podcast exposure. Secondly, send us a tweet at Cinematary, or better yet, send us an email at cinematary@yahoo.com so we can hear from you guys for a change. Maybe you can tell us where the money from Fargo is stashed, or maybe you don't think In the Mood for Love is the sexiest movie you've ever seen. Regardless, let us know your thoughts and we will read them out and respond to them on future episodes. Finally, please share the show with friends and members of your family who you think really enjoy listening to us and participating in our film discussions. We also have some cool merchandise that you can check out on the site. So to recap, review, send us your thoughts through Twitter and email, and share with your friends and family. We would truly appreciate it. Thank you for listening, and now back to the show.
Part 2 of episode 171 of Cinematary. In this part, we will be continuing our series on the Archers with 1947's Black Narcissus. This one stars Deborah Kerr, who you may remember from our Colonel Blimp episode, Kathleen Byron, David Ferrer, Gene Simmons, and Sabu. The film follows 5 nuns who, after opening a convent in the Himalayas, encounter conflict and tension both with the villagers and also within their own group as they attempt to adapt to their remote, exotic surroundings. While much of the film's dialogue is taken verbatim from the novel of the same name by Rumer Godden, the film does not follow the novel exactly. In particular, the film does not include Mr. Dean's rejection of Sister Claudia's design for the chapel in favor of his own design of an open-sided building without doors located at the top of the ridge above the Holy Man. Additionally, the imminently departing Sister Philippa is not replaced by Sister Adela, a stern nun who is horrified at the dereliction of duty by the original nuns. Of the 3 principal Indian roles, only the young general was played by an ethnic Indian. The roles of Conchi and the old general were performed by white actors in makeup. The role of Conchi was a change indeed for Miss Simmons. Conchi, who is 17, is described by Rumer Godden as, quote, a basket of fruit piled high and luscious and ready to eat. Though she looks shyly down, there is something steady and unabashed about her. The fruit is there to be eaten. She does not mean it to rot. On landing the part, Simmons told her mother that she had been given the part in which she had to have oomph, which, okay.
Well, she's got oomph. We'll get to that.
The film was made primarily at Pinewood Studios in London, but some scenes were shot in Leonardslee Gardens in West Sussex, at the home of an Indian Army retiree, which had appropriate trees and plants for the Indian setting. The film makes extensive use of matte paintings and large-scale landscape paintings credited to W. Percy Day to suggest the mountainous environment of the Himalayas, as well as some scale models for motion shots of the convent. Powell said later, quote, our mountains were painted on glass. We decided to do the whole thing in the studio, and that's the way we managed to maintain color control to the very end. Sometimes in a film, its theme or its color are more important than the plot. According to Robert Horton, Powell set the climactic sequence, a murder attempt on the cliffs of the cloister, to a pre-existing musical track, staging it as though it were a piece of visual choreography. Also, on a note of personal tension that existed behind the scenes, was the fact that Kerr was the director's ex-lover and Byron his current one. Powell later wrote, it was a situation not uncommon in show business, I was told, but it was new to me. The version of the film originally shown in the United States had scenes depicting flashbacks of Sister Claudia's life before becoming a nun, edited out at the behest of the Catholic Legion of Decency. Originally, the film was intended to end with an additional scene in which Sister Claudia sobs and blames herself for the convent's failure to Mother Dorothea. Mother Dorothea touches and speaks to the sister welcomingly as the latter's tears continue to fall. When they filmed the scene with the rainfall on the leaves in what was to have been the penultimate scene, Powell was so impressed with it that he decided to designate that the last scene and to scrap the Mother Dorothea closing sequence. It was filmed, but it was not known whether it was printed. Film critic David Kerr has suggested that the final images of the film, as the nuns abandon the Himalayas and proceed down the mountain, could have been interpreted by British viewers in 1947 as, quote, a last farewell to their fading empire. He suggests that for the filmmakers, it is not an image of defeat, quote, but of a respectful, rational retreat from something that England never owned and never understood. Black Narcissus achieved acclaim for its pioneering technical mastery and shocked audiences at the time of its release with its vibrant color and the themes of the film. Audiences gasped at some of the scenes. Notably, the shot of the vibrant pink flowers, which shone on the big screen, was a spectacle at the time. Martin Scorsese has said that the film is one of the earliest erotic films, the last quarter of the film in particular. In Michael Powell's own view, this was the most erotic film he had ever made. Quote, it is all done by suggestion, but eroticism is in every frame and image from beginning to end. It is a film full of wonderful performances and passion just below the surface, which finally at the end of the film erupts. George Perry of the Great British Picture Show said, Archer's films look better than they were. The location photography and Technicolor by Jack Cardiff and Black Narcissus was a great deal better than the story and lifted the film above the threatening banality. In 1947 in the New York Times, the reviewers said Black Narcissus is a coldly intellectual morality drama tinged with a cynicism which has the effect of casting, as it were, a gratuitous reflection upon those who, regardless of sect, have forsaken worldly pleasures out of sheer religious devotion. On that note, what did you guys think of Black Narcissus? Diana, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. First of all, I disagree with what you read that said it was. I mean, visually, if the story were just shit, like visually, it's beautiful to look at. It's absolutely gorgeous. But I like the story because I kind of like these British upper crust white people sort of going into places that they think are exotic or, you know, and kind of trying to enforce their morality and their lifestyle and their tastes and whatever on people, and then being kind of overwhelmed by it and not being able to hack it, basically. Like, we can't control these people, therefore we are retreating. And I also just kind of like that it's nuns gone wild. Like, I mean, it's really just one nun gone wild, and that's Kathleen Byron's character. I mean, she's incredible.
Yeah.
When she comes out of the doorway at the end, like, Jesus Christ, it's such like a good horror shot.
It was so frightening.
So, yeah.
Kind of like exhilarating. I mean, when she starts putting on the red lipstick, I'm like, do it, girl. Like, absolutely. Like, I don't know, there's something, like, I always kind of think of this movie and I think of, like, have you guys seen Picnic at Hanging Rock?
Yes.
So I think it's kind of the same, like, you've got this kind of, like, stifled down sort of sexual repression and other kind of repression, and then you go into a foreign, quote unquote, exotic environment, and they just, like, lose their minds. Like, how do we handle this? We don't handle it very well. I mean, we just kind of go bonkers, and we can't deal with it. So I like that about it, and but again, I just think it's so absolutely beautiful to look at. That and Red Shoes, like those are my two favorite. I mean, I love all the Archer stuff, but those two are just like, they're kind of like weird grim fairy tales almost come to life. Like, they're just so beautiful. And also David Ferrer's Shorty Shorts. But I just gotta sneak that in there because,
I mean, they said it was erotic.
They really meant a lot to me. Like, they're so great. So those are my issues.
I just wanted to add to your point. I really like this line by Kent Jones in his essay on on the movie for Criterion. He says, with great force, Black Narcissus addresses an enduring misconception, the longing, indeed fervent belief that reality can be reconfigured to conform to an ideal image. He also says that Black Narcissus is a film about people who try and fail to remake the world to their specifications. And it was paradoxically made by people who control every square inch of the environment being represented, every sliver of light, every quivering breeze, in order to render its effect on frozen consciousness as vividly and dramatically as possible. And that's something we can definitely get into in a little bit. But real quickly, Lydia, what did you think of the movie, seeing this for the first time?
You mentioned it in comparison to the Red Shoes, Diana. Grab me
Aesthetically more than anything else. I mean, I could
Yeah.
choose, but like, yeah.
I also really tend to enjoy, like, I think I called them cabin movies on one of our canon lists, but like you put these people in a space that they can't leave. Even if it's like a really big, expansive space that's a little bit open, they're still, trapped by their like foreignness and like
Function outside of the cloisters. Like, they can't even grow potatoes. Like, what are they doing?
And so like this idea of just maybe the situation's not that bad, but you have these personalities that don't get along and these goals that are at odds, and just watching all of that just boil to a head is, I think, really, those are stories that I really, really enjoy. So I love Black Narcissus. Andrew had mentioned, and I said this off mic, that he couldn't get into it for whatever reason. And last week he said you should watch it on the biggest screen possible. But shame on me, I guess. But I just watched it on my laptop because that's what I had. But I was still sucked in the whole time and like glued to my screen.
Well, I would love to see it on the big screen. I was thinking about this in relation to a couple weeks ago. I saw the 4K restoration of Suspiria on the big screen, and
I did too. It was gorgeous.
It is. Well, the thing is, I had seen Suspiria before. I saw it, on my TV, and this was the second time watching it, and I really liked it the first time. But there was something so much more vivid and overpowering and striking about the music and the visuals. And I was thinking about that movie in relation to Black Narcissus, just because I feel like while I greatly enjoyed Black Narcissus, I'm like, if I saw this on a big screen, I think that the score, the sounds, the visuals would become so overpowering that it would just make it, even better for you trying to watch it. That's
an overwrought kind of movie, and it deserves like a big production to watch it. Like, I would imagine that would be amazing to see it on a big screen. Like, yeah, absolutely.
So let's start kind of talking about those visuals. That they bring back Jack Cardiff, who worked on the movie that we talked about last week, A Matter of Life and Death. And yeah, this is one of those movies that I think when people talk about cinematography and kind of give examples, they talk about 2001: A Space Odyssey and Lawrence of Arabia, but Black Narcissus, I think, is also one of those that people bring up just because, like I said in the notes, there's just this, painter's quality to the images that you see, and they have these expansive mountain ranges, and you have like the palace up there on the cliff that's just so foreboding. What was most striking to you about the images?
What came across to me super strongly was near the end. The lighting just takes a total departure from reality, and it's like expressionistic or impressionistic, or something. Like the color of the light has changed to match this like fever pitch confrontation on the mountaintop under the bell, and like it's it's incredible. Like the rest of it's pretty naturalistic. I mean, it's still really beautiful and rich colors and great compositions and like the paintings, but I mean, when the lighting changed, I was just like, this movie has sold me. I'm here.
those backdrops are all the matte paintings and the depth and kind of texture and just richness of them. I mean, it doesn't look like reality, but it's something you can totally lose yourself in when you're looking at it. Like, they're just so, I hate to just keep saying beautiful over and over again, but like, it's such a beautiful movie. Like,
I mean, I don't know. I feel like we complain about it a lot on the podcast all the time because we're actually old people on the inside, but a lot of these painted backdrops look so much better and more believable and like have more depth even than just a lot of the CG nowadays. Like, it's so easy to just fall right into the frame here.
yeah. I mean, I grew up on Dark Crystal, and those are all like matte paintings too. And when I was 6 years old watching it, I was like, that's totally like the world I want to live in. So yeah, I'm kind of conditioned to just love that stuff. But yeah, I think it's just a gorgeous movie. Ugh.
Yeah. Well, and it almost becomes even more impressive when you know that they weren't on, you know, location for something. They were in London in a studio, you know, shooting most of this stuff, which is just, you know, just kind of absurd when you think about it, especially when you watch that movie and you just see it as this such expansive, you know, landscape.
Fall off the cliff every time they ring the bell. I mean,
That made my palms sweat. Like, I couldn't do that job.
no. No.
Let's move on to the performances in this. I think we'll definitely hit a lot on Deborah Kerr, but let's start. I wanted to talk about the kind of triangle between her and Sister Ruth, the Kathleen Byron character, and then of course Mr. Dean in his short shorts. There was a lot of mention of this being, you know, the most erotic movie that the Powell and Pressburger made. And I think a lot of that just comes from the subtlety of the kind of quote love triangle between those three characters.
It's not really a love triangle though. Like, I loved the reveal or smackdown at the end. He's just like, I've never talked to you. You became obsessed with me and stalked me and like blew up these two conversations that we had and like had like all this sexual jealousy that didn't exist over a slight or relationship that she imagined. I was like, oh my God, this is too intense.
Yeah, that's oddly relatable.
But it is like very like sexually charged and intense, even though it's, not imaginary. It's sort of imaginary on her end. Like,
well, they need like they need some kind of an outlet, and I don't think he does. Like, he's pretty comfortable with
his whole life is an outlet.
With what he's got going on, and so it's very easy for him to be like, "There's nothing going on here," which to her, like to Kathleen Byron's character, like that means everything. So that sort of sucks.
No, I also.
That's just sort of sad.
Well, I just want you know, David Ferrer's character in that it's interesting. I was reading about the movie and one of the things I saw kind of talked about him as just, you have these you know, nuns who I don't think you need to explain kind of the relationship, especially sexually, with nuns, and then you have his character Mr. Dean, which kind of just has this really strong, you know, this strong masculinity to it. You know, he's very musky. He's very, you know, he's always kind of sweaty.
That's such a good description.
Yeah. Who is it? Marina Warner was talking about the movie on BBC Two, and she said, you know, Mr. Dean, he all bare, hairy legs, insolence, and roguish eyes erupts into her, you know, the convent, the spirit of maleness embodied. And she also kind of was talking about the scene late in the film when Deborah Kerr's character is yelling at him because he shows up to the Christmas to the Christmas chapel and is drunk and is just kind of brutish, and she's sitting there screaming at him. but he's kind of like looking through her. He's, you know, he's still kind of giving this charming half smile because, you know, he's this very, you know,
he's detached. None of it affects him.
He's very detached, and he can kind of see that even though she's sitting here just laying into him, that there's some little twinge between them. And I think that just the the kind of the way they just kind of parallel these nuns and their own, a lot of these kind of repressed memories that they're dealing with him, who seems like the embodiment of all those repressed memories. It just kind of heightens this you know, growing tension that, you know, begins once they arrive at the convent.
Well, it's also like this tension between, I don't remember who said, I think it might be Deborah Kerr's character. She's talking about this feeling of you have to go all or nothing, and there's no other way to survive in this environment. Like, you have the idealism of their convent and like being totally separate from the secular world, and it's very like Christian religion, and then you have like what they consider exoticism, and his character is like a hedonist or this, and they fail to reconcile this at all. And obviously you can't live your life. I mean, lots of people do, I guess, take up the vows and try to live their lives like that, but for most of us, we compromise. And so it's watching these two extremes, I don't know, battle it out is the right word, but it leaves bodies in its wake.
One of the other things I mentioned in the notes was they have these three Indian characters that are pretty prominent in the film, and one of them is played by an ethnic Indian actor. The other two are played by English actors. You know, what was your feeling on seeing that, especially the Gene Simmons character, who and kind of her relationship to the young general character played by Sabu?
I mean, I know, there's like this knee-jerk reaction that we rightfully have, I'm gonna say, in 2017 to brownface, and
right.
Just that is offensive and awful. But they did actually cast one Indian person to play an Indian role.
So why did they make the casting choices that they did, I wonder? Because the first time I watched it, like 10 years or so ago, I just thought, oh, I like Kanji. She's lovely, whatever. That's extremely problematic now. But to me, I mean, it was extremely problematic from the beginning. But I wonder what their decision, like why they make the decision to cast one ethnic actor and then cast. Did they just need big names, or did they need, like, what was the reasoning behind it?
Just to kind of add to the conversation, I'll read this quick bit from Kent Jones's essay. He says the decisions to create the General's Palace of Mopu in the subtropical garden in Horsham and on sets at Pinewood, and to cast May Hallett as Midnight and Gene Simmons as Indian seem to place the film squarely in an earlier and less culturally attuned era. However, one could argue that Powell took such a course of action precisely because he wanted to stay relatively true to the culture of northern India, as well as to the dramatic structure of Rumer Godden's novel, albeit within the confines of the glorious artifice that was already an Archer's trademark. Do you buy that? Do you buy it being kind of a decision to stay within this this artifice that, we talked about, even, that even though you look at these luscious, beautiful visuals, it does seem, otherworldly. It doesn't, there's still a facade to it a little bit that seems fake. Do you feel like that justifies the decision to cast these English actors because it's just adding to the artifice, to the fakeness of the reality of the movie?
That sounds like a retroactive justification.
Like, was that their just? investigation when they actually cast her.
But I mean, I guess trying to set like that reaction aside, just looking at maybe the relationship between those two, I was a little bit unsure what it had to do with the rest of the narrative. Although I will say the most erotic.
No, like
Yeah.
like down on her knees in front of the
Yeah.
Oh Lord.
With those very piercing eyes,
Yes.
her eyes. I swear, every shot had to have her just like peering into the camera or peering off the camera. You were just like, oh.
I mean, it works. Like, yeah, retroactively, like it's effective filmmaking, but that does sound kind of like a made up kind of reason that they concocted after the fact. Like, yeah, we were doing this faux artificial kind of thing. Like, yeah, that was our plan all along. Like, no, you just wanted to cast Gene Simmons because.
Well, and he also kind of puts it up against, because 4 years later, Jean Renoir went and shot The River, all in India, and he's kind of talking about it compared to where Black Narcissus was a they shot it on a set rather than going to India. But that one, I guess that film is much, it's those are two different cases that are, while the stories may be different, similar in terms of their location and kind of they both also come from, rumor god novels. So
Yeah.
I wanted to also talk about the directing of Powell and Pressburger. We're 3 films in now. We've seen Colonel Blimp, Matter of Life and Death, and this one now. Especially Lydia, especially you, since I know that you've been watching along with the series. Has there been any trademarks? Have you kind of seen anything that's carried over through all the films that seems distinctly Powell and Pressburger that you've noticed?
I was saying this earlier to my parents, but for the life of me, I can't kind of find a through line for the Archers. I mean, they all have like really gorgeous cinematography, and of the 4 I've seen, the 3 of the series, and I've also seen Red Shoes already, like kind of epic in scope and sort of not morality tales, but
Yeah, but a little bit, yeah.
very complex, but within a kind of simple narrative setup. But as far as like a mode, I'm having a hard time connecting them as like finding a through line, which is not a bad thing at all. All of them have been really excellent, but as far as like a studio or auteur sort of cohesion, I can't get there.
I think the one thing that I've noticed, and this comes from the reading that I've done connected to all the movies, is kind of how they're commenting and looking at Britain and at this period in history. We talked about it a lot with Colonel Blimp and Matter of Life and Death, because those seem so intertwined to World War II, which was happening at that time. But this one, I mentioned the quote about this, about the end of the last shots being this suggesting Britain's at that point in time going, this is a last farewell to this fading empire. I don't know, maybe they're the through line that kind of carries through their movies. At least what we've seen so far is this kind of interesting look at nationalism in Britain at this period in history. Diana, I haven't seen Red Shoes, I don't know, so I don't know if that leans in. Anything you'd like to add?
We're in for a treat. The thing for me about Red Shoes and this is also like kind of this storybook Brothers Grimm kind of quality to not, and that's in the way they look, and that's in I mean that story, I don't want to say anything about it, like spoil it for you. Like there's uh, on a superficial level, they also really seem to like redheaded actresses, and that may just totally be an aesthetic thing. Like,
I feel like red looks really good in Technicolor.
Yeah, and
yeah.
Looking at that on camera too, like that's.
Well, you just think of like Deborah Kerr in those flashbacks when she's in Scotland and she has like this this flowing red hair in the Scottish Highland.
And so when you see the red shoes, like literally the shoes are going to jump off the screen at you. And that was my first introduction to them, was like...
Well, my first introduction to them was like it was also the red shoes. And I was like, oh, they're making art about artists and commenting on that. But now I've seen their two like wartime films and this, and that blew that theory right out of the water.
So I know what the common thread is. I mean, Red Shoes was the first thing I ever saw, and I kind of came to them through that. And I didn't love it the first time I saw it, but then when I saw it again, I loved it. And then I looked at all their other stuff, and like it all seems very English to me, which I like. Very, very English.
I will say surprisingly funny sometimes, even.
Yes.
Well, maybe that's why I'm seeing this kind of this look at nationalism, because my first Powell and Pressburger movie was the first one that we watched pretty much, and so I hadn't seen a lot. I feel like maybe if you started with Black Narcissus or the Red Shoes, maybe you're coming at it a different way than I have. I do.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that there is this
like apex, and as opposed to earlier stuff that was a little more low key. Like, I mean, Red Shoes and Black Narcissus are full stop, just high energy, super Technicolor, like everything. Like they're firing on all cylinders in those movies. I think it's a lot to process. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. So that's why I'm like, maybe I'm just coming at it from a different, from another angle, just because that's where I started. But I really do think that there is this nationalism angle, and I talked about it a little bit with A Matter of Life and Death last week. But I don't think it's this, gung ho, putting up the flag, we're so patriotic attitude. It's this very interesting, somewhat disparaging, somewhat cynical look at kind of what has gotten England to this place in time. And we talked about it, Lydia. We talked about it with Colonel Blimp, because it's very apparent what they're trying to kind of comment on in that movie. But I think I agree with that assessment with Black Narcissus, where it's not nearly as overt as the other two movies. But I think that there is somewhat of a comment on the state of Britain and its role in the world at this period in time.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's like the whole colonialism experiment, I guess, and how that was destructive for everyone involved. Clearly. So that's like the backdrop. It's not, you're right, it's not as in the front, but it is the whole backdrop of like building a covenant in India and attempting to spread this like very Anglican version of Christianity. Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up, any closing thoughts on Black Narcissus? Anything to leave people
Shorty
with?
Shorts.
Little donkeys.
Little.
No, that was so funny. I'll repeat that because we said it off mic. But I love the fact that you have this hyper masculine character by David Ferrer who just walks up, is just so roguish, so so dashing, and then he gets on his little donkey and rides down the mountain. It's just, there's this like small emasculating factor to it that's very comical.
I think that's a good note to end on.
That's true. Yeah, no, I'll say as a last thing, I'll echo again what I said before, but also add to kind of what Andrew was saying last week about seeing this on a giant screen. I think that this is just one of those movies that it's so pronounced, both in kind of just in all the areas of of cinema that I like. I like that you made the point, Lydia, earlier that it's a cabin movie. You know, I mentioned Suspiria earlier, but it does definitely has that feeling like something like a Suspiria, or a more recent example like a Crimson Peak, where it's all this one location, and the location seems to be the location and lighting seem to be just like this evil force that's coming up against the characters of the movie. And I've just really lately been loving those kinds of movies, because there's just something so enamoring by it, because I like the subtlety of it. I love that it's it doesn't come out and try to create fear by doing the silly tricks that a lot of modern horror movies like to do, where it's banking on jumps and such like that. I think that something like this, there's still this undercurrent of fear in Black Narcissus, especially at the final sequence with Kathleen Byron. That when we talked about it earlier, she's
terrifying, and I'm rooting for her, but I'm still terrified by her at the end.
The way her face, like whenever she like will just cut a smile, and the way they light it, it's so.
Yes.
Yeah,
They're,
they should have had her
cheeks
playing like the Joker in a Batman movie or something. Oh my gosh. But yeah, I think that this is a movie that if you can see it on a giant screen, it'll be even more effective, and I think you'll get more out of it, just because you need that just amazing musical score just beating you down. You need to have the wind, that howling wind, just where you can't hear much else. I think that the sound effects and the music and the visuals will overpower you, and that's the effectiveness of the movie, because that's kind of what the characters are dealing with as well. And I think that that's the lasting impact I have with Black Narcissus, because I heeded Andrew's advice and I had all the lights turned off and I watched it, and it was very effective that way.
It was also effective on the small screen. Don't be scared off if you don't have a home theater.
No, you have to go to Walmart, buy a 4K 60-inch TV, and then you can watch Black Narcissus.
Just watch it. So darn good.
All right, well that'll wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary. You can find us on Twitter at @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all of the movies that we talked about in this episode. Next week, we've already talked about this movie in this episode, but next week we will be continuing our series on The Archers with 1948's The Red Shoes. Just a side note, let's just... A Matter of Life and Death was 46. Black Narcissus was 47, and The Red Shoes is 48. That's an incredible 3 years. And Colonel Blimp was 43.
Oh man, these are like productions,
right?
Too. I can't imagine putting it together in a year.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, The Red Shoes is next week. Very exciting. I'm looking forward to talking about that one. But until then, thank you guys for listening.